Of course, a lot of bills get introduced. A lot of bills got introduced in this first 6 months. I don't see a whole. You're absolutely right. A lot of these bills, they're reruns. We've seen them before. I don't have an exact breakdown of which of these bills might have shown up before, or might some in way, shape, or form shown up as a lot of bills. I can tell you, anecdotally, having reviewed all these bills myself, a lot of these are very new ideas. And of course, a lot of them stem from a particular situation that happened to one individual. And of course, that's very important. We want to do right by Ohioans. I think the question is whether we want to make such sweeping changes to the criminal code and add to our prison and jail populations as a result.
Would you guys agree that any bill that results in even one more person going to prison is automatically bad?
Can I speak up? At least for my organization, of course not. But what I suggested is, we have, at this point, it's not as if we don't have a robust criminal regulatory code set up. The question that needs to be asked, the questions that need to be asked before a bill is enacted, as far as we're concerned, that would send one more person to prison, is, first of all, is this something that's better regulated through civil law or not regulated at all? You need to ask that question first and foremost. Is this something important enough to send someone to jail? Is it something that's currently being regulated? Does the cost to Ohio of imprisoning someone justify the benefits that would be created by not just regulating but criminalizing the particular conduct? Those are the sorts of questions that need, and does it ultimately serve justice as well? Is this something that's so repugnant to our particular regime that it's important enough that we incarcerate someone for violation rather than use a lesser penalty? If it meets those requirements, then we wouldn't have a problem with creating a law that would send someone to jail. But you need to ask those sorts of questions. The problem that we frequently have, in a previous capacity, we did some studies at a national level and worked with folks at the Justice Department, and even they noted that any time there's a new tragedy, there's an instinct among folks that to show that you care, to show that you're concerned, to show that it's important, what you need to do is to create a new crime. And what we're suggesting today, I think we would all agree, is you should check that impulse. That perhaps we need to take a look and say, perhaps there are enough crimes already on the books. Maybe there's a way to address the concern, to address the problem without using the strongest medicine that legislators have, the criminal code.
Are there any bills?
I was going to say, I'll just add very briefly. Look at what the Department of Justice reports about crimes and criminal acts for not just the past months, but the past years, the past decades. Criminal offenses across the board, you can really pick just about any serious criminal offense, and they keep decreasing over time. Ohio in the United States is a much safer place than it was decades ago, but you would never know that from the number of bills that get introduced and passed, Ohio and across the country.
Well, I had a real quick follow-up, because Mike was saying to stop introducing bills. Are you guys saying to stop introducing bills, or look really carefully and make sure, as Mr. Alt was saying?
I think what we're doing here today is we're trying to draw a bright line and say, at a minimum, wait for the Criminal Recodification Committee to get its work done. Ohio is already, those of you, I know many of you were at the Recodification Committee press conference a couple weeks ago, and you saw the criminal code printed up into, I think it was 5 very large books of just the criminal laws here in Ohio. As Robert had pointed out, I think we have adequate laws at this point to take care of whatever offenses there might be in Ohio. So I think at a minimum, what we would all like to see is wait for the Criminal Recodification Committee to get done with its work and impress upon particularly committee chairs and leadership in both the House and the Senate to be very mindful of which bills they allow to progress through the system while other people are looking at these problems.
Is there any bill on the list that you think could pose a public safety threat now if it can't wait 10 months?
Having looked through all these bills, I don't see it. I mean, maybe if we sat down and had a cup of coffee and looked through the report, we'd say, oh yeah, well maybe that one kind of thing. But it's not like new situations are arising. It's not like people are doing something that's fundamentally different than what we've done before. Actually, what it is it's very much the opposite. With some of these bills, what we're doing, for instance, is propping up a thoroughly failed war on drugs where we think that we can incarcerate our way out of this problem. Well, that doesn't work today, it didn't work last year, and it didn't work 20 years ago. That's a briefing for a whole nother time, what we do about this so-called war on drugs. But, some of these bills, what we're seeing is let's get tougher on this, and that just hasn't worked. Now, there is a bill in the legislature, for instance, to give people their driver's licenses back, which we anticipate will pass, when they commit offenses that are not related to driving. Because, of course, there's a lot of problems that stem from people, particularly people with a lower amount of resources, not having their driver's licenses. And it would be great if the legislature, if and when they pass that bill. But I tell you what, let's not break our hands clapping, because that's something that should have been passed 20 years ago. That is a very modest reform right there. And what we're talking about is an incredibly overcrowded prison system. When I came in 20 years ago, that was right after Lucasville. And those of you who have been doing this long enough remember, it was this very overcrowded prison system that led to the tragedy of Lucasville, and that's worst case scenario what we're trying to prevent here today.